In this video, I'll be showing you how to create a client-facing agenda from scratch. We have a lot to cover, so let's get into it. Whether you're having a kickoff call for clients, or this is your first client on-site trip, it's always important to have an agenda established and prepared so that you'll be able to speak to the topics that are most important. In this video, I'll be sharing an example client agenda that we can walk through together so that you'll know the things that I tend to think about when planning for this. To start things off, there are a couple of internal tasks that you need to keep top of mind when you're planning out your client on-site agenda. The first of which is just understanding who your attendees are and which attendees should be joining from your teams and from your client teams as well. To start things off, you'll want to determine who are your internal stakeholders. Typically, depending on the client on-site trip, if it's the implementation team, if you're currently installing a new project, or if the project's rolling off, it could be your long-term regional or account management team who needs to do the maintenance. If you're starting off a project, it could be your sales counterparts. When planning out your internal stakeholders, I think it's important to think about two main things. What is the timing of the project? The timing is crucial with knowing who from your internal team should be involved in that conversation. The second of which is understanding your own organization's policies. In many circumstances, only set individuals had the clearance in order to go on site, to be mindful of the budget as well. Next, we'll go into logistics. So for this client on-site agenda, you'll need to plan out how many days are you going to be on site. You'll want to be thinking about not only the trip days, but also what are the travel days that need to be involved as well. So for example, let's say you wanted to be on site at one of your clients from Monday to Friday, so a whole working week. In order to meet your clients on time, you'll likely need to travel that Sunday before in order to make any travel accommodations. So likely that trip, which ended up being a 5-day workday, in actuality, that trip might last either 6 or 7 days depending on when you fly in and when you fly out. Okay, when it comes to flight options, it's really important to think about what the major airports are and where your client on-site's facility is. So for example, if I were flying from somewhere in New York to another destination, I would try to pick out the 3 main airports, whether that's JFK, LaGuardia, or Newark, and to look at the pricing in terms of how much those airways are, the distance it would take me in order to reach that airway, and any other accommodations. It's really important to factor layovers as well. It's oftentimes the most cost-effective flight. It may have a 5 or 10 hour layover. Depending on your organization needs and your travel bandwidth, that may not be the best option for you. Once you've determined the duration for the trip, the attendees, and the flights as well, it's about time that you start planning for the hotels and for your lodging. When planning the location for the hotel, I like to think about 2 main things. Where is that client's facility or on-site location at? Where is the airport located at that you're flying into? I always try to find a hotel that's equidistant or somewhat along that path so it's easier to travel to and from. For client on-site trips, most organizations will reimburse or cover you for those, so you want to make sure that you have any loyalty memberships or accounts associated with your flights and with your hotel so that you can get the bonuses and points for those. So now that you've gotten your attendees, you've gotten the on-site dates, your hotel and your flights look good, let's think about transportation. How are you going to get from the hotel to the client on-site location? With technology these days, there's a lot of different options for transportation. If you're old school, you can do a taxi. There's also Uber, Lyft, and even rental cars. Okay, so now that we've gotten the travel logistics out of the way, let's talk about some of the things that you should think about when planning the actual agenda. Depending on the phase of your project and the goals of the on-site, the types of topics can range from covering recruiting, growth, and strategy, to observing processes, to looking to streamline processes, opening doors to any enhancements or product opportunities, whether it's shadowing and just learning from your clients, providing additional trainings if needed, or just feedback from stakeholders and end users. So that's a pretty high-level summary of the types of things that you need to start thinking about and planning internally before you actually make the agenda visible to your clients. Now that we've gone over all the fun stuff that you'll think about internally, let's dive into an example of a client on-site agenda, which I'll pull up on the screen. Okay, so this is an example of a client on-site agenda template. You can definitely cater or change the template depending on your organization and your project needs. To start things off, think about the title of the visit. What is the purpose? Keep the namings and titles short and simple. Oftentimes there are multiple locations, and you'll need to find the addresses for each of those to make sure you have them down. And last but not least, record those dates that you were thinking about internally and that you've already confirmed with your project stakeholders. It's always nice to include your logo and your client's logo as well. That shows that this is a very personable and this is a very intentional trip that's specific for that client. Let's now plan for an example agenda for one of our clients. On this template, there are a couple of things that I tend to think about when it comes to planning for an agenda. The first of which is you'll want to be very detailed about the times and the locations. You'll want to make sure that your teams and your client teams know where to find you while you're on site. It seems like a no-brainer, but with so many companies these days doing business virtually and online, it can be easily forgotten when you actually go there on site. While you're doing that on-site visit, likely your clients will be very busy doing their day-to-day routines. You don't want to be in their way, you just want to find out what are the best times to meet with them and to provide value to them. Oftentimes, your executive sponsor will have an administrative assistant or an administrative team which can help you to plan those logistics around stakeholders' availability and calendars. All right, next we'll go into the meetings themselves. This aligns hand in hand with the example topics to cover which you've been brainstorming on the internal side. Depending on your organization's needs and the goals for the client on-site trip, you'll want to tailor your topics and make sure you're very intentional with engaging your stakeholders. The bottom line is you don't visit a client if you don't have any goals. So whether that's identifying new business opportunities, enhancing and strengthening the client relationship, or learning from your client and trying to identify better processes, think about what the overarching goals are, and that can help you with breaking down the topics that you need to cover. If you're visiting a client on site on a Monday, one of the first things you'll like to do is to check in with your main stakeholders. It's always good to show face, to do any introductions, and to get those out of the way when you first visit the facility. In the agenda template, you should not only have an overview of what the meeting's about, but also a detailed breakdown of what the goals and what the next steps are for that meeting. And as always, it's important to identify who the attendee should be. So your internal stakeholders and your client stakeholders as well. If your client sees business value and wants to continue the partnership, and you think this is a good opportunity for your organization as well, it's good to be prepared with decks and agendas to talk about what the next steps may be if you want to continue this partnership long term. As always, I think it's important to have lunch breaks. Lunch is one of those things where it can really elevate everyone's mood, and it helps to keep things casual as well. Throughout the client on-site trip, you want this to be as enjoyable as possible. No one wants a salesman who's constantly pitching and pitching at you without actually being fun or entertaining. Know when to turn it up and know when to turn it down as well. I tend to like to do lunch with my clients just because it's a nice gesture. It allows you to learn more about them in a casual setting. Having a lunch period also breaks up the professional and the goal-setting sessions that you have during the morning and the afternoon and helps create a nice break and cadence between. I like to hold an end-of-day type of office hours. So if it's a post-live visit, just notifying all my stakeholders and end users that while I'm on site, we have this certain time period blocked off where anyone's able to come in and ask questions. I think it's really important to show that you are available and you're approachable. The end users are likely the ones who will give you direct feedback on how to better your product. All right, so after you've wrapped up all of your sessions for that day, you're gonna wrap it up and you're gonna close it out with all your clients. Client on-site trips are some of the most awesome and rewarding times that you'll have with your stakeholders. If it's your first client on-site trip, it's exciting to see people's faces in person that you've been working with. And I truly believe there are a lot of values and learned lessons that you can get just from seeing things in person. I hope you found this video helpful on how to create a client on-site agenda. As always, if you found this video helpful, make sure you like, you comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next video.